For nearly 3 centuries, warriors from the north changed the course of history. They were explorers, traders, raiders, and conquerors. From 793 to 1066 CE, Scandinavian seafarers embarked on an era of expansion that would reshape medieval Europe and beyond. But who are these people really? And what drove them to leave their homeland in search of fortune? Let's start with a common misconception. Viking wasn't actually an ethnicity or a nationality. It was a job description. The term comes from the Old Norse word Vikingur, which roughly means pirate or raider. Not everyone from Scandinavia was a Viking. Most were farmers, craftspeople, and traders who never left their homes. The people we call Vikings came primarily from 3 regions: Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. They shared similar languages, gods, and cultures, but they weren't a unified nation. They were divided into chiefdoms and small kingdoms, often at war with each other. So what made them so successful? 3 things: their ships, their warrior culture, and their timing. The longship was a masterpiece of engineering. Shallow draft meant they could navigate rivers as easily as oceans. Flexible hulls absorbed the punishment of rough seas. And their symmetrical design allowed them to reverse direction instantly without turning around, perfect for surprise raids. But the Vikings weren't just raiders. They were also master traders and craftspeople who established trade networks stretching from Baghdad to Byzantium. They were poets who composed elaborate sagas. And they were explorers who reached North America 500 years before Columbus. So, why did this expansion happen when it did? Historians point to several factors. First, population pressure. Scandinavia's farmland was limited, and the practice of primogeniture, where the eldest son inherited everything, left younger sons with few options. They could stay and work for their brothers or seek their fortune elsewhere. Second, climate change. This might surprise you, but the late 8th century saw a warming period that made long-distance sea travel more feasible. Longer summers meant longer sailing seasons. Third, technological advancement. The development of the keel and sail transformed Scandinavian boats from coastal vessels into ocean-going ships. But perhaps most importantly, opportunity. The Vikings discovered that the monasteries and towns of Christian Europe were wealthy and poorly defended. Churches held gold, silver, and precious objects, but monks weren't warriors. It was like finding an unlocked treasure chest. The raid that started it all happened on June 8, 793 CE, at the monastery of Lindisfarne off the coast of England. The attack shocked medieval Europe. Never before had heathens dared to attack such a holy place. One chronicler wrote that it seemed like the world was ending. But for the Vikings, it was just the beginning. The British Isles became the primary target for Norwegian and Danish Vikings. Year after year, raiders returned, their attacks growing bolder and more organized. Initially, these were hit-and-run raids. Vikings would strike coastal monasteries and towns, grab what they could, and sail away before any army could respond. But by the 830s, they began to winter in England and Ireland instead of sailing home. They were no longer just raiding, they were invading. In 865, a massive force called the Great Heathen Army landed in England. Led by legendary figures like Ivar the Boneless and his brothers, they conquered 3 of England's 4 kingdoms. Only Wessex, under King Alfred the Great, managed to resist. The peace treaty of 886 divided England roughly in half. The Vikings controlled the north and east, an area known as the Danelaw. For the first time, Vikings weren't just raiders or conquerors. They were settlers, farmers, and neighbors. In Ireland, Vikings founded Dublin, Waterford, Wexford, Cork, and Limerick, Ireland's first true cities. They transformed the island's economy and culture. While Norwegians and Danes sailed west, Swedish Vikings looked east. They traveled down the rivers of Eastern Europe, the Volga, the Dnieper, the Don, establishing trade routes and settlements. These Eastern Vikings became known as the Rus, a name that would eventually give us Russia. In the 860s, they founded the state of Kievan Rus, centered on the city of Kiev in modern-day Ukraine. This would become one of medieval Europe's most powerful kingdoms and the ancestor of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. But the real prize lay further south. Constantinople, capital of the Byzantine Empire and the richest city in the Christian world. Vikings called it Miklagard, the Great City. Some Vikings attacked Constantinople, launching several sieges that were repelled by Byzantine defenses. But others took a different approach. They joined the Byzantine army. The Varangian Guard, an elite unit of Scandinavian warriors, served as the emperor's personal bodyguards. It was the most prestigious military posting a Viking could achieve. The eastern trade routes brought the Vikings into contact with the Islamic world. Arab silver flowed north in exchange for furs, slaves, and amber. Archaeologists have found thousands of Islamic coins in Scandinavian hoards, evidence of this vast trade network. One Arab diplomat named Ahmad ibn Fadlan left us a detailed account of a Viking funeral on the Volga River. His description is both fascinating and disturbing, showing the Vikings' elaborate death rituals and their belief in the afterlife. The most remarkable Viking journeys weren't conquests. They were explorations into the unknown Atlantic. Around 870 CE, Norwegian Vikings discovered Iceland, a volcanic island with no native population. Within decades, settlers established farms and a unique form of government, the Althing, one of the world's oldest parliaments. Iceland became a distinctly Norse society that preserved the old stories, poems, and traditions. Much of what we know about Viking culture comes from Icelandic sagas written centuries later. But Vikings pushed even further. In 982, a man named Eric the Red was exiled from Iceland for murder. He sailed west and discovered a massive ice-covered landmass. In a brilliant piece of early marketing, he named it Greenland to attract settlers. It worked. Despite its harsh conditions, Greenland supported Norse settlements for nearly 500 years. Then came the big one. Around the year 1000, Eric's son Leif Erikson sailed west from Greenland and reached North America, specifically Newfoundland in modern-day Canada. The Vikings called it Vinland, and they established a settlement at L'Anse aux Meadows. This was 5 centuries before Columbus. Vikings were the first Europeans to reach the Americas. But the Vinland colony didn't last. The distances were too great, the resources too scarce, and conflicts with the indigenous. The Vikings' military success wasn't just about ferocity. It was about strategy, adaptability, and superior mobility. Their weapons were simple but effective: axes, swords, spears, and shields. The iconic Viking axe, the Dane axe, could split helmets and shields with a single blow. Swords were expensive and prestigious, often given names and passed down through generations. Body armor was rare. Most warriors wore leather and thick cloth. Only wealthy warriors could afford chain mail. Helmets existed, but the popular image of horned helmets is a myth. There's no historical evidence Vikings wore them in battle. Viking tactics emphasized speed and surprise. They preferred raids to pitched battles. Their ships allowed them to appear anywhere with a coastline or navigable river, strike quickly, and vanish before reinforcements arrived. When they did fight in open battle, Vikings formed shield walls. Overlapping shields created. So, what ended the Viking Age? The traditional date is 1066, the year of the Battle of Stamford Bridge and the Norman conquest of England. But the real story is more complex. The most important change was Christianization. As Scandinavian kingdoms converted to Christianity during the 10th and 11th centuries, raiding Christian lands became problematic. Kings like Harald Bluetooth of Denmark and Olaf Tryggvason of Norway embraced Christianity, sometimes forcefully converting their subjects. Christianity brought Scandinavia into the mainstream of European politics and culture. Viking raiders became Christian knights. Pagan jarls became Christian lords. The old ways faded. Political consolidation also played a role. Scandinavia itself was becoming more organized under strong kings. Denmark, Norway, and Sweden were emerging as recognizable nations. Ambitious young men who once would have gone Viking now found opportunities at home in royal service. Meanwhile, the targets of Viking raids had learned from centuries of attacks. Fortifications improved, Standing army, the Viking Age ended 1,000 years ago, but its impact remains profound. Genetically, Vikings left their mark across Europe. DNA studies show Scandinavian ancestry in populations from Ireland to Russia, from England to Italy. Linguistically, the English language is filled with Norse words: sky, window, egg, knife, they, them, their, all come from Old Norse. Place names ending in by Thorpe and Thwaite mark areas of Viking settlement. Culturally, Vikings established cities, trade routes, and kingdoms that shaped medieval Europe. Dublin, Kiev, and Normandy all have Viking origins. The political structures they created influenced the development of modern nations. And perhaps most importantly, the Vikings remind us that history is made by those who dare to venture beyond their horizons. They were warriors, yes, but also explorers, traders, craftspeople, and settlers. They were complex people living in a complex age. The sagas they told, the ships they built, the lands they discovered, these aren't just ancient history. They're part of the foundation of the modern world. The Viking Age may have ended in 1066, but the Vikings themselves never truly disappeared. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the Viking Age, please like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what historical topic you'd like to explore next.